Greetings and salutations once again. It is movie review time during the time of October, or the spooky season as I like to call it. And we're going to be talking about the very recent film called Weapons. Came out this year, as I said, 2025, directed and written by Zach Krieger, or Krieger. I don't know how you really pronounce it. But anyway, we have Josh Brolin, we've got Julia Garner, Benedict Wong, we got Alden Einreich, I think that's how you pronounce it, as well as many others. And we have a movie, right, that is set in a very small suburban town. And I consider Weapons a thriller as well as a lightweight horror film. It's shot in multiple perspectives of different characters from whom we get interconnecting stories, almost as if it is almost a Crash style storytelling device, right? If you're familiar with that film. And we're thrust into the midst of a tragedy in which an entire classroom of children disappears, with the exception of one by the name of Alex, played by Carrie Christopher. Over the course of the film, we are taken on a ride, right, to pinpoint the cause of this mysterious disappearance. The story centers around one of the main characters, Justine, who is played by Julia Garner. She is the unfortunate soul who happened to be the teacher in charge of that missing classroom. And without a concrete cause to the incident itself, the entire community thrusts the blame onto her, which begins the proverbial quote unquote witch hunt, aptly named, of course, because there's a particular plot device that happens later on in the film where that term applies. No spoilers though. And I don't really blame the parents, and who could blame the parents as well as the community, though. It's a very human reaction to grief, right? To cast blame upon something that you do not know. Or excuse me, actually, you know what, let me rephrase that. You can't blame them, because it's very normal to cast blame on something that you do know because of something that you do not know. That's what I was trying to say. That's not also saying that I necessarily agree as to why they did it, but I understand why, if that makes sense. And as I said, it's done in that Crash quote unquote style narrative, and those multiple character perspectives of the events that occur to get kind of a better grasp of the situation, right? And to avoid spoilers, I won't be disclosing the cause of the mystery. You're just going to have to find that out for yourself. Okay? But I will be going over cinematography, acting, storytelling, as well as what the movie was trying to say. I mean, you saw the title. What the hell is Weapons, right? And we'll get to that. So sit tight. So for the cinematography, as I stated before, it's shot into the perspective of multiple different characters, different narrators, which is very refreshing because you get to have a good understanding of what people's motivations, as well as the multiple different angles of the events itself. Another ingenious aspect to the filming is that in order to narrow down as to why this had happened in the first place, we're also shown footage from multiple different cameras that were employed through security systems that the community had in place, like your Ring, doorbells, security cameras, things like that. So you have not only the high quality camera, but you have these kind of substandard film shots, right, which adds to that sort of quote unquote realism, right? And the usage of these, one of the other characters, Josh Brolin, is able to kind of narrow down that suspect list. And it can be difficult to tell a story through these different viewing sources, but Weapons does do a really fantastic job to make it feel fluid as well as not quite jarring. And when you talk about the acting, every single aspect of that kind of gets elevated. Somebody called me. Let's get back to that though. So with the acting, every single character does do a very great job. Honestly, stand-up performance by everybody involved, especially Julia Garner. Her performance as Justine really, really amped it up. And one scene in particular where she is in a bar with another character by the name of Paul. He's played by Alden Ehrenreich or Einrich. For don't really know how to pronounce his last name, so apologies if I mispronounce that. But anywho, she employs one of her quote unquote weapons on the unsuspecting victim, that is Paul. And this really left an impact, right? So she is honestly, she's an alcoholic, to put it quite bluntly. And I don't blame her, because in order to deal or cope rather with the stress that the community has placed upon her, she turns to the bottle. But, I just said weapons. She employs one of her weapons. What do I mean by that? So this is the biggest question that I had on my mind, and I'm sure you have on your mind as well while you watch this movie, or if you're planning to watch this film. It's just like, okay, why is it called Weapons in the first place, right? So through different interviews, the director had stated that it is a allegory for alcoholism, and I do agree with that to an extent. I do think it does go a little bit deeper than that. The general theme and the message that the film is trying to get across, in my opinion, is that many things can be considered a weapon. And I'm not talking about in a traditional sense, right? So different things can be considered a weapon, not only to somebody else, but to you yourself as a person. So, for instance, you have those two characters who are alcoholics. You have Paul and Justine, right? And then you have another individual who unfortunately is addicted to methamphetamine. Then you have two other characters who overindulge in food, which can be attributed to gluttony, right? You have another character who exhibits traits of toxic masculinity, another that is a narcissistic or a sociopath. They almost combine into one. You have apathetic teachers that turn a blind eye to bullying. There's many other and very different examples of these quote unquote weapons. So when I talked about the example of Justine employing one of her weapons against Paul, she uses and kind of exploits her own femininity to manipulate Paul into breaking his sobriety, because he is a recovering alcoholic, right? He's been sober for quite a while, but she uses this, almost guise to kind of coax him into not only sleeping with her and cheating on his wife, committing adultery, but you also have him breaking that sobriety and falling back into his alcoholic tendencies. So to me, I do feel like that's what the film was trying to get across through its subtlety. The message of how people can, be their worst enemies through their very different vices or weapons, if you will. And the only issue that I did find with the film is you really do have to suspend your disbelief while watching it, because there's another character who goes by the name of Gladys, who's played by Amy Mediga. I think that's how you pronounce it. And I don't want to give too much away, but when she is confronted by many different people of authority, she is able to portray a visage of innocence and purity that is honestly, she does a freaking great ass job. It's chef's kiss. And I have to give her her flowers. You know, kudos to her. She really did a phenomenal acting job. And there are other things that the character does that you do have to suspend your disbelief for. That's not the only one. But for the sake of not spoiling the movie, I do have to leave it at that. If you know, you know. The last thing I did find fault with was that there were some moments in the film that did feel a little bit dragged out that could have used a little bit trimming. You know, this would allow the story to kind of flow better and just smooth those rough edges out, if you will. But this is a very, very minor complaint. Overall, I do think that Weapons is a great story and an even better film with some minor hiccups here and there. It is still very much worth watching, and I do highly recommend checking it out. I would safely give it a 8.5 out of 10. So hopefully you enjoyed that review of Weapons. Do you agree with what it's about? What do you think the film is about? Please let me know in the comments below. Make sure you like the video as well as subscribe to the channel, so that way you do get more reviews like this and other kind of content, or follow me on Twitch, whatever your proclivities are. But hope you guys stay safe out there, and above all else, hope you stay rad. Take care.